In May of 1951, with the Cold War escalating between the global imperial powers of Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union, 18-year-old Carl Gene Penzel graduates from the high school building constructed by his grandfather Linus, diploma in hand. After the Second World War, with the Germans defeated and most of Europe left in ruin, the United States embarked on efforts to create a world order that embraced its foreign policy, culminating in a speech given by President Harry S. Truman on March 12, 1947. It was this address before the United States Congress that effectively laid out what became known as the Truman Doctrine, where he pledged to contain the communist threat. The Cold War had begun. Both the United States and the Soviet Union had acquired scientific advancements from a vanquished Nazi regime. Most of these were uncovered during Operation Paperclip, spearheaded by the United States. These technologies went on to power the space race, such as the Apollo program rockets and advanced jet engines. But there was another program the Germans had developed that both the United States and the Soviets coveted, their interstate highway system, the Autobahn. It would not be long before the United States began its own plan for continental highways, built on top of older plans dating back to the early 1900s from California to Washington, D.C. Upon graduation from high school in Jackson, Missouri, Carl Gene Penzel enrolled in the pre-engineering program at Southeast Missouri State College in Cape Girardeau, where he studied for 1 year. He finished his academic career by studying engineering at the Missouri University of Science and Technology, which at the time was called the Missouri School of Mines and Metallurgy. Carl Gene earned his Bachelor of Science in 1955, with a primary focus in civil engineering. He promptly became a professional engineer soon after. However, instead of joining his father's company, Carl Gene enlisted in the United States Navy. He was sent to Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island, and inducted into the United States Navy on August 2, 1955. He went through his pre-flight training at the United States Naval School as a naval aviation cadet on a path to earning his Navy Wings of Gold and a commission in the Marine Corps. There, he participated in a 16-week course, received 531.5 hours of training. The curriculum for indoctrines, OLS, was 215 hours with 6 weeks of work. His studies in the academic department included aerology, engineering, Navy orientation, navigation, principles of flight, and study skills. By January 1956, Carl Gene was an ensign. He was released from his duty in Rhode Island that same month. It was after his time spent in Newport that he was transferred down to Kingsville, Texas. The National Auxiliary Air Station in Kingsville served the United States as a base for naval aviators. He served here in the Advanced Training Unit 212, where he would gain accreditation as a flight instructor. The NAAS at Kingsville's primary mission was to support advanced flight training activities with fleet-type and training-type aircraft. Here, Carl Gene flew craft such as the F-9F Panther and the S-2F Tracker, with training aircraft like the TV-2 Shooting Star, F-9F-8B, and the F-9F-8T transitioning into the program. Carl Gene earned his designation as a naval aviator on March 15, 1957. He went on to Pensacola, Florida, to become a naval flight trainer. It was here where he instructed future naval pilots in fighter tactics, instruments, cross-country navigation, bombing, gunnery, and aircraft carrier qualifications. He eventually found himself serving on the USS Saipan, a light aircraft carrier and the lead ship of her class. The ship was commissioned roughly 11 months after the close of the Second World War. In her early years, the ship served as a training bed for student pilots, instructing them on how to operate fighter jets at sea. Carl Jean earned the unique distinction of becoming the first naval aviator in the United States military to graduate with his Navy Wings of Gold and be offered a full instructor position the very next day. He served the United States military in between wars, and many of his students saw combat in Vietnam. On August 8, 1958, Carl Jean received news that his grandfather Linus had died. Back home in Jackson, Missouri, the family entered into a period of grief for the man who had started Pennsill Construction Company some 47 years prior, leaving his hometown forever changed because of the work he did in its development. The infrastructure he built can still be seen to this day in many parts of southeast Missouri. It would not be until the following year that Carl Jean would leave the Navy, completing his active duty assignment on April 10, 1959, receiving his official honorable discharge on December 1st. That same year, he moved back to help his father, Carl Linus, continue at the family business. By 1953, the Dwight D. Eisenhower administration created a new plan to overhaul the past attempts at national highway construction, which resulted in the passing of the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. Two interstates, I-44 and I-70, began their construction efforts in earnest in Missouri almost immediately after the passing of the Highway Act. It wasn't until July 17, 1962, that the major north-south interstate, federally designated as I-55, began. The entire Missouri portion of this interstate started between Carl Linus's hometown of Jackson and Cape Girardeau. The prime contract was awarded to Patashnik Construction Incorporated, which had an impressive global reputation already established by the late 1950s due to Irvin Garm's efforts establishing highway projects both in the United States and around the world. Carl Linus was approached by Patashnik to become the subcontractor for its bridges. And by this time, Pennsill Construction Company had a long history of bridge building for over 20 years. Patashnik struck ground on July 17, 1962, just north of the old McKendree Chapel, the oldest Methodist church located west of the Mississippi River. The current LaSalle exit stands nearby today, right where the construction began. By November 29, 1962, the interstate overpass between Cape Girardeau and Jackson had largely taken shape above old Highway 61. Patashnik pile driver equipment, furnished by Irvin Garms, erected the bridge pylon structures for Carl Linus to eventually place steel pilings on. This would be how Pennsill Construction Company built the big traffic interchanges, with the pilings all forced down to solid bedrock. Carl Linus would spend months working closely with Irvin Garms on the exit bridges and diversion channel bridges at Cape Girardeau, Fruitland, and Scott City. In total, this accounted for the first 14 miles of Interstate 55 in Missouri. It was this major project where Carl Jean first worked alongside his father, Carl Linus, and it was one of the first federal projects that Pennsill Construction Company was involved in building. It covered a period of an initial 14 months, followed by more construction in the subsequent decade. Patashnik went on to construct all of I-55 from Sikeston to Festus, Missouri, and Irvin Garms kept Carl Linus as the bridge subcontractor for the duration. It was finally on September 8, 1963, when the opening ceremony was held at Center Junction, the area between Cape Girardeau and Jackson, Missouri. The Center Junction project and the advent of the federal interstate highway system through Cape Girardeau and southeast Missouri allowed for expansion in population, economy, and industry in the decades to follow, with Pennsill Construction Company now playing a dominant role in the creation of infrastructure throughout the region.